Ventura, welcome to Get Moving TV. I'm Dr. Chris Landon and I serve as your host. Here in Ventura County, we have an innovation center down in Camarillo. There's a kick-ass cafe on Fridays bringing out all kinds of people. And what we see there, we think of engineering and math and science and technology have all turned from what used to be women's fields back in the 1950s and 60s and 70s with coders being women, and then suddenly it's an all-man field. So I really want to welcome CEO of a very innovative game-based education company. I don't know if I got all the 6 words that are part of it. So tell us about yourself. And
thank you very much, Chris Landon. Yes. I had a first career in network television and branding. I worked for MTV. I had a hit show that was a techno music show, and then I did a redesign of the sci-fi when it went to SYFY. I did Delia's clothing catalog copy concept, but there was a health crisis in my family, so I went to nursing school. And when I went to nursing school, there were a couple of things that I saw. One was that I saw that some nurses, for example, would already had certain ideas intrinsic to their being. So there were certain nurses who would come in from the subway system. I was going to nursing school in New York City, and they felt that their hands were dirty and they were not happy until they washed their hands. Then when I started working as a nurse, I saw that there were nurses that weren't washing their hands because they were too busy, and preventative care was kind of last on their list. So because of what I came from was branding and getting people to behave in a certain kind of way, because that's what commercials are. I invented a way of training people using video games. So the video game learning, some of this I've learned as I've gone along. You know, my main thing was how to get people to internalize behaviors. But one of the things that I've discovered with video game learning is that this is one that I just recently realized, is that we prefer to be corrected by a machine. We don't actually like a person telling us we've done something wrong, but we don't care at all if a machine tells us that we've done something wrong. That's one thing. The other thing is that we like to do things ourselves. Like even when you're a little kid, 2, 3 years old, they're like, I can do it myself. This thing, the computer, what I think that is I think that that's a giant way we can go in, because our brains don't know that isn't real. It's a giant way we can go in and do things ourselves. And that's the piece that hasn't been explored yet of this marvelous new reality that we have. So of course I have a whole bunch of virtual reality ideas as well. But so what I've made is I've made little movies, and in the movies I turned the employee into the boss, because that's what's happening when you're playing a video game. You're the boss. You're the one who's running the world in the video game. So as the boss or the person who's running the world, you're much more interested in the rules being followed than you are if you have someone over you telling you what to do. The other thing is I think that our capacity for learning is short, or taking in new information. It's better in little tiny bits instead of 20 minutes or an hour and a half of learning. So, and using video game technology, you can train people to do things in my games are between 2 minutes and 5 minutes. In the hospitals, that exact same type of training is 20 minutes, an hour and a half. And it's pretty boring. So I also use some of the stuff that I learned at MTV to make some very interesting games. And we learn 2 ways. The amygdala moves information from short-term to long-term memory, either by repetition, which is what we mainly use in school, or through excitement. So if you can think of a moment in your life that was very exciting, you almost got into a car accident, you asked your wife to marry you. Usually what happens is you have like a very good, complete memory of that particular exciting moment. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make training that is exciting and also repetitious. But there's some other things. When I was working at MTV, I was a little bit older than everybody else who was working there. So my boyfriends were much younger than I was, and so I would watch them play video games, and I would try to figure out why were they so compelling. And one of the things that I thought was that there are a certain level of difficult that we like. We like a challenge. And a lot of training that we get nowadays is really dumbed down, and it doesn't need to be dumbed down. It makes it boring. So exciting, very, very quick. You're the boss. And then there's scores, and you win or don't win. And so it's kind of, I use all the video game aspects that will make for learning that is fun and easy and gets internalized by the watcher.
I think we've made videos here around COPD. You and I were talking earlier, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and so we made excellent 1 hour, very complete information. And when I presented to doctors, nobody watched it. So we broke it down into 10-minute segments, and some retired doctors watch it. Finally, put a cat video in the middle, and finally everybody watches it. So it's that, it is that. And then the other is when we have this show on YouTube, or I put it up as a podcast, we find is, gosh, somewhere around, for me, 8 minutes and 36 seconds in, people go, okay, that's enough of that, and off they go. So when we take the show, which is an hour long or 28 minutes long, we really shorten it up to that digestible interval. And we've really found now it's 1 to 3 minutes and people are done. It's very sad what Facebook has done to people. The other is just the whole gamification, and we're working, we've had a guest on before, with an opioid use disorder app, and it was all about, do you give people Jamba Juice cards or whatever? And as it turns out, people would rather be the leader on the leaderboard than get a Jamba Juice card. So how do you do your gamification side? How does that work out for you in terms of, does a set of nurses have a leaderboard and I'm ahead, or are they competing against themselves, or zombies are going to come get them? Or
There is a leaderboard, and the game is fairly simple. Often when I'm talking about it, I like to demonstrate it, because I could talk 1,000 words and 2 seconds will take care of how it's played. So we could show you, but it's...
well, I think they can see it as we...
Sure, yes, I can certainly, somebody could email me and then I would just show them how to use the game. I don't have, I'm not particularly rigid about non-disclosure, because the technology is fairly complicated to imitate. I believe when the company gets very big, there'll be imitators, of course, because if you could get learning that actually sticks, that people, internalize and then continue to do they do the correct behaviors because they feel that that's the correct behavior, then, that's pretty good for learning. But
let me just say, just back to the topics for a second,
sure.
Because we're talking a lot of learning theory, and these are people watching this who forgot to go to get their degree in psychology or medicine, and we're really talking about their relatives in hospitals who are getting Clostridium difficile infections because somebody didn't wash their hands, they didn't think about what they were touching. So could you tell a little bit more about why they're doing it, as well as what they're doing and how you're doing it?
So there's a number of different topics that you could actually do the games on, and I would eventually like to have a very large library. I also believe that the technology is applicable to other subject matters, how to run a cash register, how to do an inventory. But the 5 I have now mainly have to do with infection control, because C. diff and MRSA and even just, small staph infections, all of these infections, they cost between $45 and $65 billion a year. It's about $40K per hospital bed. C. diff lasts on surfaces for 72 hours, and any surface, not this table that's where your food is, this railing of your bed, the curtain that they pull shut. So if a nurse comes in and pulls a curtain shut, and then another nurse comes in and touches that curtain, then she's got C. diff now on her hands. And if you are immunocompromised, which pretty much everybody in the hospital is, you get this terrible illness, which usually keeps you in the hospital for 3 to 5 days longer. And it's intensive diarrhea, and it's very difficult to get rid of. So, but if all the nurses have to do is be aware of the fact, oh, I was in somebody else's room, I'm not going to touch that curtain yet, and then they wash their hands, then you can prevent C. diff across the board, all of it. You can make it so that nobody gets it ever. Same thing, the other things I do is pressure ulcers, which are cost an enormous amount of money per year as well. And sound, they used to be called bed sores, and I remember when they called bed sores, they sounded kind of cute. They're not cute, they're terrible. I've seen them as big as my fist on people's backsides, just a big, terrible hole. And they're also highly preventable. All you have to do is just engage in very specific behaviors. And if you feel compelled to engage in those behaviors as a nurse, then these problems would never occur.
And so with your gamification, so are they seeing a little video scene? What do they see?
So it's a movie, there's a movie, and then people are behaving in the movie, and it's essentially the way you play the game is you identify that's a bad behavior, that's a good behavior. And then at the end, you get leaderboard, and you also get a score, and then you get to see what was the wrong and right reasons. I've set it so that right now that it's kind of high. You have to pass at a fairly high level. And when you don't pass, there's a little noise that comes on. Wah, wah, wah. And I showed it one time to this 5-year-old that I was, kind of hanging out with, and then I wanted to see if he would play it. Like, were the video games interesting enough for him to play? He played all 5 of the ones that I have now all the way through, but only because he wanted to hear that noise again.
Yes.
He liked the, wah, wah, wah. Yeah.
Well, and then it matches what they do have to learn, and
oh yeah, it has everything in it. It has in it. So when you're playing it, everything that you need to know is in there. So imagine if you were taking American history, and you can do it much quicker because you're doing sound and visual at the same time, which can be fast. So imagine if you took a class in American history and there were 150 things that you need to learn in that particular time period. Then the teacher only tests you on 10 of them, presuming that you know the rest of them. This, we test on every single thing, because you can test very quickly this way. So usually there's like 60 things, but by the time you get to the end of the training, you've also taken the test. So and there's no cheating it. Well, I suppose you could hire someone to play it for you, but why would you hire somebody to play a 2-minute video game for you?
On this last little bit, could you talk just a little bit about financing? So you're looking as a woman entrepreneur and innovator, so
yes.
It's a full-time job.
It is a full-time job. Yes, I have it as my full-time job. It's very fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. So essentially, the way that so there's a lot of different ways of paying for training in the hospitals now. So we boiled it down to $30 per nurse per license per year. They can play it as many times as they want in the year. The administrator can assign it as many times. Since there are 2-minute to 5-minute segments, you could actually assign it, and it could be played on the phones, or it could be played on your home computer, or they could set up a station. So there's a lot of easy ways to actually play the 2 to 5-minute videos. So $30 per license per nurse per year. So it's low end of the scale for what people pay for training for nurses now, and has the tremendous benefit that you don't have to put 50 nurses in a room for an hour and a half while you're training them. So you would save all of that money as well, to say nothing of the lives and money you would save when the nurses actually behaved the way they're supposed to. Not to say anything against nurses, I'm a nurse myself. They're working very, very hard. But, that's part of my thing, is why should the training be boring for nurses and lengthy? Yeah.
All right, well, we look forward. I hope that we will be able to be a pilot site for you so that we can be successful throughout the world, the universe, intergalactic, whatever it takes to educate the world. So Ventura, hospital administrators, get ready for a new method of education, and we'll be right back. Ventura, welcome back. We're here with Cassie, Dr. Cassie from the CTN, Children's Therapy Network. And we've asked her to come on board because I see a lot of their work. I'm review charts for the Tri-Counties Regional Center. We have worked very hard to put a screening into place where all the pediatricians, family practitioners really learn how to screen early. They use the PEDS and the ages and stages questionnaire so that we can get them at a time when we can really have some intervention. So
absolutely.
So tell us about Children's Therapy Network. How long have you been here?
Children's Therapy Network, I've had Children's Therapy Network for 15, almost 16 years. I love children. I always have loved children, even when I was a child. I love children, but I'm a physical therapist by trade, and started working with children as a physical therapist about 25 years ago, and just loved it. And so I saw a need and wanted to create something that met what what was personal to me. And so I started Children's Therapy Network 15, 16 years ago. I was a network of one, but since then it has grown. And we, like you said, we are looking to identify children early that may have a delay, whether they're not meeting their milestones or they already have a diagnosis, and start working with them early so that we can catch them even before they get into the schools, because we want them to be successful in the schools.
Well, we're screening kids down at 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, and this winter, as I'm watching it, we have a lot of kids with speech delay that's really popped up, and there's a lot of fluid in their ears and so forth.
Yeah.
And so you have someone, we've got visual, auditory, tactile, speech, perceptual, motor. How do you provide those services? How do you get those kids back on track?
Well, we really believe in a holistic way of working with these kids. Sometimes we are at the mercy of whatever the prescription is or what the funding source will allow, but we do have physical therapy, so obviously working on the gross motor and their ability to move and walk and jump and play. Then we have occupational therapy, who you mentioned earlier, visual perceptual. They work a lot on the visual perceptual, feeding. I have a few therapists that work on feeding. Surprisingly, that's a big issue with these kids, especially if they've got a lot of sensory issues. We have speech therapy, so we have actually a lot of speech therapists, and that seems to be the biggest need that we get the referrals for, and they are working on the pragmatic skills, their articulation, language building. And the fourth type that we have is an early interventionist, and they really are more global. They work on the social, emotional, educational, but more than anything, we work with the families. We teach the families how to work with their kids, because it's not going to matter if we go in and work with the kids, 1-2 hours a week, if we don't teach the families how to work with their kids.
Yeah, and that's where we see, they go, oh, there's this big black box, and I throw my children in, and I don't have to do anything the rest of the time. And
Yeah.
But when they hear 40 hours a week, it overwhelms a lot of them too.
Yeah.
So how much time would you like a parent to put in, or do you help them to integrate it into their normal life, but just a little higher level of skill? How do you do that?
Well, the idea that we have, and we really spend a lot of time educating our therapists, because so often we come from a medical model, from a hospital or from a clinic, where it's, like you said, okay, we take the kid, we do therapy, okay, we fix them. No, that doesn't work that way. So what we like to do is when we work with a parent, we're really only in the home once, twice, maybe 3 times a week, but we really want a caregiver, and we will talk to them about, this book that you have sitting on the floor, let's talk about, the puppy. What color is the puppy? Where's the puppy's nose? Those kinds of things that parents might not even think about just because of their daily lives. They're, cleaning the house, doing the laundry, going to work, whatever. To really educate them that it's really their interaction with the kids and how to use everyday things in their home to engage with the child.
Yeah, I think active reading is what we do, is reach out and read. And we have a program in Kampala, Uganda with Rotary. And they wait for my $200 worth of books, because they will, as they go out in the villages and do an immunization clinic. And the parents are learning to read the same time as the kids are learning to read. And again, working from a picture. We've done the same with our Mixteco population. And we have it phonetically and in English and Spanish. So it helps the mother who's Spanish speaking learn English, and the mother who's English speaking to maybe learn a little Spanish. So is your staff bilingual, or culturally it's hard too?
It is. It is, but there is a need, and we certainly reach out. There's more therapists now coming out that are bilingual. We actually have a multilingual staff. Most of my therapists do speak English and or Spanish. But then we have a couple that we have Russian, we have Hindi, we have, Tagalog. Unfortunately, at this point, we don't have Mixteco right now, but I understand that's a need. But we really try to integrate the language and have a multilingual staff.
And then whereabouts are you located?
We are, well, we have a clinic here in Ventura. We are actually opening a second clinic in Moore Park, but we cover all of Ventura County and even South Santa Barbara County, depending on where therapy is going to be provided, and that also depends on the requirements of the funding source. So we do have clinic space, but we go into the clients' homes, we go into the clients' schools, we meet them at the park. We're everywhere.
Mm-hmm. So how did you get this as an interest? Because we look at people in the arcs of their lives, and we've had lots of people on this show start out in doing one thing and end up doing another. And so what kind of education does it take and for your staff and so forth? So if a student was listening or someone wanted to re-enter the workforce, what are they looking at for education?
Sure. So we actually have a variety of different therapists from different educational backgrounds. The early interventionist usually has either an associate's or a bachelor's in child development. So they have that. As far as therapists are concerned, we do have assistants, whether they be physical, occupational, or speech therapy assistants. Those are licensed professionals in the state of California. But that schooling is, other than the prerequisites, which are usually 1 to 2 years, the licensing for an assistant is about a year. So I actually started out as a physical therapist assistant years ago. My parents were like, we'll pay for this part of school and then you're on your own. And then moving to the higher level, the therapist, not the assistant, but the therapist, that's anywhere from a master's degree to a doctoral degree anymore. So I went through being an assistant to my master's to my doctorate. I don't know, I just love school. But so there's any variety, but I actually liked being an assistant. So we have that whole gamut of education that people could get into this field and be successful.
And then, we haven't talked about this previously, so I'm not sure the answer that you'll have. So how do you incorporate technology into what you're doing?
Well, if you're talking about technology with the actual student or client, we have found that, like one of your previous guests, that we're able to engage with the kids at times with different electronics, with the iPad and games, so on and so forth. We don't like to do our entire treatment like that, but absolutely. So all of my therapists have tablets that we do all of our medical documentation on, as I think a lot of people do now. But they also are able to download different apps that engage the children. You know, especially children who have autism, they tend to be able to engage with the electronics sometimes, and it acts kind of as a buffer to get them at least one step closer, and then we can get them out.
And then do you have a magic bag of tricks? So there must be physical things that you bring along too. What's
you know, we do, although I really encourage my therapists to not take anything into the home and use what's in the home or use what's in the school. But we can't help ourselves. We do bring in our exercise balls and our balance boards and our, stacking blocks and things like that. So, but I really do encourage them to take as little into the homes as they can.
So you just have to MacGyver in there and put together.
Well, what's a family going to do? That's the thing, is if you take all this equipment in or all these toys in, especially for some of our families who are low socioeconomics and they don't have a lot in the home, we come in with our bag of toys or our bag of tricks and then we pack it all up and leave. Well, what's the family to do? Where if you go into the home and say, hey, we've got these pots and pans, let's do something with these. Or you've got beans in a plastic bottle, let's make a rattle. So the answer is yes, we do have our bag of tricks, but I really encourage my therapists to not use it, not take them.
So, and then what kind of office hours, or so they'll visit at night, during the day, your clinic is open. So when do you provide services?
Well, we actually have just extended our office hours to be, so we're now open until at least 6:30. Sometimes we can do later appointments by special exceptions, and some of my therapists are even willing to go out on Saturdays. I don't particularly require that of them, but if they're willing to, I say, sure, go for it. We are staying up open a little bit later because we are getting more and more insurance referrals than we've ever had before. And families are working parents, and the only time they can come is after hours. So,
well, if you've been at this for 15 years, you've seen the insurance business kind of come and go, and the whole finally, unless a legislator has someone with autism, suddenly applied behavior analysis is paid for and the like. So how much? So you're just in terms of someone who want to take this on as a career, are they looking at a $30,000 a year kind of thing, or 60? I know you run a business, which is hard
you mean
enough.
you're talking about what their
How about your own
general
therapist,
income?
your speech therapist, your assistants, your
Again, it depends.
because you have to make that payroll, and that means the insurance has to pay, and when there's a gap, there's only so much charity
Funny
you
you
can give.
should mention that. I've actually been talking about all the red tape. That's the
Yes.
one thing I don't like about
Yeah.
running the business. But I really enjoy. One of the things I was just saying is we have one particular therapist that I just love when he's in the office working with our kids, because I might be in the back, room doing my QuickBooks, and I can hear him laughing and joking, and the kids are laughing and screaming, and it's like, oh yeah, this is why I do what we do. But as far as what you were talking about, what pay they would get, again, it depends on the level of education. But
So ability to pay back student loans, that's what I'm looking at. So might
well,
take a
student
while.
loans are so high, but yes, you
Yes,
can.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
I
yes.
finally paid off my student loans. Yes.
That's very, very exciting. Well, Cassie, thank you so much. Thank you for
Thank
supporting
you.
Children's Therapy Network here for so long, getting out into East County in Moore Park. It's, bless you, my child.
Thank you.
Going into people's homes, providing culturally and linguistically appropriate behavior for your clients. So.
Thank you.
So Ventura, it's time for nurses to get better education. It's also time for thinking about education and advancing your own career in terms of helping children with disabilities. And down to CTN. So Ventura, it's time to get moving.